matters. This is your opportunity to participate in making the world better. So without further ado, let's get ready for Straight Talk Live with your host, Edna Howell Parrish.
Welcome to the show. I'm Edna Howell Parrish. Our show today, one that I know you're going to be interested in because we're standing to defend democracy. As always, standing to defend democracy. And what does that mean? In other words, we're going forward. We're not going to let anybody push us back. We're going forward. So if you're a person who wants to go forward, if you're a person who wants to vote, who wants to see things moving ahead, this show is for you. We've got a lot packed into the show today. So sit back, relax. Be sure to like the show. Be sure to share the show and call somebody and tell them that we're on. And if you just happen to catch the show on the rerun, it'll be there for you to hear and watch all the time. So be sure to check that out. Now, at the Democrat National Convention this week, we heard our presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, say her mother told her, never complain about an injustice. Do something about it. So I'm wondering what you're doing about an injustice in your life. Could it be that you think that we're getting the raw end of the stick when it comes to getting our freedom? What are you doing about it? Are you complaining? Are you supporting Kamala Harris? Are you sitting back and saying, well, I'm not going to vote this time out. I'm going to sit it out. Well, we're here to tell you today that voting is so important in your life that if you don't vote, you're going to miss out on a lot. Our guest today joins us, and we'd like to welcome her. She is from Chesterfield, Michigan, social media coordinator at a university in that area. Guest Crystal White Combs. Good afternoon, Crystal, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. I can't wait to talk about voting and the Democratic Convention and all of those things that surround that. So thank you.
Standing to defend democracy is something that is so important. Kamala said her mother taught her never complain about an injustice, do something about it. Do you think in your lifetime you've ever heard those messages from your parents? Don't complain, do something about it.
Um, I've been thinking about that a lot because before the convention started, there was so many parallels being made between right now and 1968, which I think was such a pivotal time in the last century that leads up to now. And I think about, Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, they were all people that we're all around the same age. And we saw what was happening at that time. And some that narrates our stories in a lot of ways. And so I think as a child growing up in Cleveland during the Huff riots, watching my mother as a nurse being picked up by the National Guard to go work at the riots. My dad being stopped by the police during the riots, coming home. He was working two jobs. He was an engineer, mechanical engineer, and then he did welding at night. And he said during the riots he was stopped by the police for being on the wrong side of town. Watching that, my dad taking me to see Cesar Chavez speak in Public Square. Carl Stokes, the first Black mayor of Cleveland, was my aunt's neighbor. Just all of these people that I saw speaking about wanting change certainly affected me as a child. What speaking out could do, the assassinations of Kennedy, the assassination of Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, Bobby Kennedy, seeing that speaking out, being involved in politics is a high stakes conversation that can affect so many people's lives. So my parents did not hide those things from us. Instead, they kind of curated our interaction with it. Kamala Harris said one of the things that I thought about, we were not allowed to watch a lot of TV. And I think that kind of shaped the way we ended up thinking about things because it was either books, conversation, or experience. And I think that leads you to formulating your own opinion about things. So did my parents shape the way that I ended up feeling about politics. I think they curated how I formed my opinion about politics.
As I was planning for today's show, I look around at social media and just people that I know and friends, of course. And I happen to be going through a Facebook and looking at people's pages. And I happened to see this one page that just stuck out. A big black and white sign just said vote. I said, I wonder what that's about. So I looked at the page and I thought, well, what is she talking about? And the more I looked and the more the different comments I saw, she's really interested in this voting issue. And that's what we want to talk about: voter registration, voter education. So I contacted Crystal Combs White. I said, are you really interested in voting? And we started talking. And right away, I could tell she's going to be the perfect guest for the show. Because as we talk today about fake election crisis and voter fraud, how it can undermine and influence people not to vote, causing them to stay home on election day. Or people be thinking, well, I don't know anything about that candidate, or I heard a lot about Kamala Harris that she prosecuted and put a lot of black men in jail, so I'm not going to vote for her. I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. How ignorant is that, Crystal, in my opinion?
D.L. Hughley got up and apologized for some of the things that some preconceived notions that he had about Vice President Harris. And, I call it social media university was where he got his facts from. And he said that he had not even done a Google search to see what the facts are about Kamala Harris. So the facts are simply that she was a prosecutor and it was her job. It was her job not to seek out she's not a police officer. She was a law enforcement person. But the facts of what she is accused of doing do not speak to that. They literally do not speak to that. And it was literally like 45 black men out of 1,000 that ended up going to jail. And so I would just implore people, because voting is so serious. It affects, and that's why it's one simple word to me. It's vote. Do your due diligence, just like you would to go renew your plates or driver's license. You're going to find out where, how much, what will happen to me if I don't have that license. That's what's going to happen to you if you don't vote. And I hate to boil it down to scare tactics, but what we have seen in the last couple of years, we ought to be afraid. There ought to be the urgency of now in terms of let me vote. Do your due diligence. Find out about that candidate. Don't just rely on a post to let you know. Look it up for yourself. Find out about yourself. If find out about Vice President Harris back on track recidivism program to help people that have been incarcerated get back on track when they get out of jail. Find out about what she did. Find out about who she did it to. Don't let the other side tell you the story they want you to know. Find it out for yourself. And you have to remember, as a Black female, we navigate the world under tremendous pressure, under tremendous pressure to perform above and beyond. So we're crossing every single dot. We're not performing for anybody else but ourselves. We know what's at risk when we go out here and navigate the world. And so think about that. Think about your mothers, your sisters, your daughters, and what they have to do every day when they leave this house. They're protecting our own all the time. And she is no different than the rest of us, which we can talk about her racial identity, I mean, my DNA is not on display for everybody else like hers is, but she presents herself as a Black woman, and you should take her word for it. You should take her word for it. We don't question anybody else but us when that comes down to, the litmus test. But to go back to your question, yes, just do your due diligence about learning about the candidates.
You're right. This week at the Democrat National Convention, I saw D.L. Hughley come on stage, and I kept thinking, well, why is he here? Because I know I have heard him say some negative things about Kamala Harris. I mean, some real bad things. And then when he got on camera, on mic, and started speaking, and like you said, apologize. I was like, that takes a big person to be able to do that. Now, how many other men, black men and black women who repeat things that they've heard, negative things about people, about her as a candidate? Um, it's amazing to see what happened and him come out front like he did. I just thought that was amazing.
I appreciated it so much. He has such a large audience that listen to him or retweet him or repost something that he said. I just hope it got to them. And he said a Google search. I mean, he drilled it down to simple terms that all of us, directions that all of us can follow. Google it. Find out for yourself.
Well, we watched that convention, and I thought some amazing things happened at the convention. We'll take a view
We
at some of those
hereby
things.
call the Democratic National Convention to order.
Here we are, America. Are you ready? Are you ready to stand up in this moral moment?
And I, for one, am tired of hearing about how a two-bit union buster thinks of himself as more of a patriot than the woman who fights every single day to lift working people out from under the boots of greed, trampling on our way of life.
So it is no surprise, is it, that he is lying about Kamala's record? He's mocking her name and her laugh. Sounds familiar.
You see that hammer finds the nail, and the poor man's up for sale. I guess I'm doing what I'm on this earth to do.
It's been the honor of my lifetime to serve as your president. I love the job, but I love my country more. I love my country more.
Yeah! Ladies and gentlemen, we are here tonight to officially nominate Kamala Harris for president. Start, get out, another round of shots. DAC, turn out for what?
For years, Donald Trump did everything in his power to try to make people fear us. See, his limited, narrow view of the world made him feel threatened by the existence of two hard-working, highly educated, successful people who happen to be black. I want to know, who's going to tell him that the job he's currently seeking might just be one of those black jobs?
Okay, Michelle. She said when they come at us and they go low, we go high. So she put the
I
high
think
on him right there.
I think that when we
the
go high,
Democrats left the convention this week, they left with a lot of joy in their hearts. That's for sure.
yes, they did. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. I think she has evolved that message about when we go high. She's taken it to another higher plane. So
Yeah, Kamala, she did accept the nomination, as we all know, for president of the United States of America. And she said, on behalf of the people of every American, regardless of party, race, gender, or language, your grandmother speaks. She said, I accept your nomination for the United States presidency. So why do you think it was important for her to put in there about her family, her gender, when her grandmother spoke to her and her mother spoke to her about how she should react?
think it was so powerful because they're on so many different levels. Because going back to gender and um, her mother, who was certainly came from India, came here at 19, her grandmother. She could have been referring to her Jamaican grandmother. Um, we we are unseen and unheard a lot of times. And to be on that stage speaks to the way she was raised by women. It speaks to that. It speaks to developing her own voice, and having the rest of us develop our own voice and how we go about this world and how we navigate that world. So I thought it was very powerful for her to refer to those women, her mother. You've seen pictures of her with her Jamaican grandmother. You've seen pictures of her with her mother. And I think that she recognized that she was shaped by very strong women. And I think that even though she doesn't mention her father a lot, her father was a very well educated man that he used to tell his daughter, run fast and go as far as you can. You have to be raised by a strong woman. A man that's raised by a strong woman will tell his girls to run far and go be strong. And he chose a strong woman to be the mother of his children. And so I think that her shouting that out, amplifying that message of the unseen and the unheard, I think it empowers us. It felt empowering for me. And I hope it makes us think about how we're raising our own children so that they will have the confidence to be on a stage like that and speak to making this world better. I thought it was very powerful when she referenced those two women.
In the days that are to come, we have 70 days, maybe the countdown is 70, for Kamala Harris and her running mate to take their case back to the country, back to the nation. Can they do it in 70 days? Is that enough time for them? I know they leave out, they'll be in Georgia this week on a trip to not the big cities, the smaller country towns in Georgia to make their case. Donald Trump and his candidate for vice president, they'll be out on the trail as well. They're going to Big Rapids, Michigan, and they're going to Potterville, Michigan, and they'll be in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and they'll be in Detroit tomorrow, I believe, for the National Guard Association of United States conference now. So they're going out there making that case before the country. Are they going to change over some people? You think this has made a difference in some people in terms of how they'll vote?
You know, if we think about this whole year and how things have just moved so quickly and changed so quickly, we think about the month of July. Who knows what can happen in the next 70 days? Who knows? If they debate each other, who knows? Who knows how this political tidal wave that we're currently in, or political tsunami,
Yes.
who knows? But you know what? What I've noticed is, there's been some complaints about her not doing sit down interviews yet and all of that. Both candidates appear to be really out here hitting the ground. I mean, you can't say that they're not necessarily, I don't know, when we talk about crowd size, I don't know if both candidates are necessarily, one candidate might not necessarily have the same crowds, but there is certainly an energy about getting out here amongst the people right now. And I think that between now and November 5th, we're going to see those appearances. I don't know how they're going to do it, but I think they're going to squeeze in from sea to shining sea. I think they're going to hit the plains. They're going to hit the Midwest. I think you're going to see them a little bit everywhere. And I think that people are feeling the need to get out here and connect with the candidates. I'm like, is she going to come to Macomb County? Is there somewhere where I can go? And I'm not really a crowd type of person, but I am ready to go feel that kind of energy. And I think a lot of people are, based on really what happened at that DNC convention. We want to get out there and feel that and hear those messages. And it's so inclusive of other people, other people being able to speak, although there's some criticism about who she included on, in the convention, but I think she's willing to listen. But to go back to your point, I think we're going to see a lot in these 70 days to shape people's opinions. And I think it's going to be these in-person events.
Have anybody ever asked you to register you to vote, or asked you to join a voter campaign or political issue campaign?
Yes. During one presidential election, I volunteered every day and I went to the headquarters and I called people. I was actively involved. I took the Get Out the Vote training, where you go door to door. I've been asked to vote. Ask, am I registered? Just leaving someplace. I've been asked that. Um, had a door knocker come. I've done door knocking. I think, there was a candidacy, Hillary Clinton, 8 years ago, and I was very actively involved in that campaign. Yeah, I've done that. And so as a result of being actively involved in a campaign, you start knowing the people that are continue to be involved. So yes, I've been involved, and I think those candidates, those kind of campaigns are useful in terms of getting people to register. Here in Michigan, if you're going to turn 18 before the election, you can register to vote before the election. So I've seen a push to high schools, back to school drives, people registering voters, and of course at the post office here. So.
Absolutely. Now, you're from Chesterfield, Michigan. Where is that located in the state of Michigan, and how active is your community involving politics and elections, and your
Okay.
household as well?
Okay. So I live about 35 miles northeast of Detroit. I live between Detroit and Port Huron. I'm about 3 miles away from Lake Huron, not too far. And I live in Macomb County, Michigan, which is one of it's a very studied, it's studied by a lot of politicians. News media outlets always come here for election day because you can never. They feel like we're kind of like a bellwether, like we are. It's kind of atypical for a Democratic county to vote the way they've voted before. We have a Democratic county exec, a Republican prosecutor, and so that pretty much sums up the way our county is. We're called the Reagan Democrats. The longest road in the county is Highway number 3, and it's called the Ronald Reagan Highway. And but Democrat union workers. So I would just say that we're always going to have a presidential candidate. They're always going to come to Macomb County. They're always going to come here. And it's just a matter of when. We'll probably be a little bit later in the campaign. And that's typically what they do because they're going to speak to a loud crowd. So it's a very politically active county. And of course, because we're a suburb of Detroit, we're very much affected by the politics that happen there. So work, roads, everything, education, infrastructure. So anybody that comes to Detroit usually will come here. We'll be a part of that. So
What is the
very
major
much
industry in your town? The major industry?
auto parts. So, but there are
Okay.
auto factories here. There's a lot of auto parts, little shops that create parts for the big plants. There's a lot of those here. A lot of service industry that's connected to the auto industry and the plant workers. So, when the auto industry falls, so does Macomb County. We're very much affected by that. So there used to be more plants here. There's not as many, but it still very much drives what we do here.
How about your household? How active is your family in politics? I know you have children. Were they involved in politics, or are they involved now? Your husband?
So, my husband is a first generation. He's Bahamian. He has dual citizenship. He is eligible to vote here because he was born in the United States, but he also holds citizenship in the Bahamas. So he's very active in voting. So he's one of 9, and there's only 3 of his family that are eligible to vote here. And so he feels like when he casts his vote, he's casting it for everybody. So he's going to go. He's going to go vote, and he's taking it upon himself to make sure that at least 10 other people that he knows gets to the polls that day. And so by saying that, he's like, are you registered? Do you have a plan for voting? Talking like that. With my children, I know my daughter's going to vote. She lives in Georgia. She lives in a state where there has been very active voter suppression. And
Yes,
she
yes.
has a 21-year-old college student. So they have been very active in checking to see if they're still registered. There was something that went on the last time where she voted, where she had to, you know, produce some type of documentation because she had moved so that she'd be eligible. She has to be actively engaged as a voter and not just show up on November 5th thinking everything is okay and I can vote. And if I had to give everybody a message about voting, that's what I would say. We can't just show up on November 5th. We have to make a plan. And right now is probably the time to start making that plan. You know, find out if you're registered, find out what those dates are. Does your ID match your voter registration? You don't know how diligent they might be at that polling place about checking that. They're going to scan it. You know, find out what kind of ballot are you gonna vote for your candidate on. Is it going to be a Scantron? Are you going to vote by a voting machine? You can even look at your ballot most of the time on for me in Michigan, it would be my Secretary of State's website. In each state, it might vary where your ballot might be. Find out. There's been a lot of changing and condensing of polling places because as schools close, as different things have closed as a result of the pandemic, where you voted for might not be the same place anymore. So find that out. Make a plan. Make a plan. You know how Obama said, don't boo, just vote? You can vote, but make a plan to vote.
Indeed. In our next segment, we're going to talk more about voter registration and more specifics about that. But I want to go into our Black History segment because we always have that at the half of the show. And this week I chose Fannie Lou Hamer. Now, she's a phenomenal woman. She was a people power person, a sharecropper, didn't have any education, very little education at all. But when it came to getting out there to pressure and get her right to vote, she just laid her life on the line. She laid her life on the line. What do you think about Fannie Lou Hamer?
I think as we talk about women being involved in politics and the pressures of being a woman and having an active voice and encouraging others, a sharecropper, you know that wasn't easy work. You know that wasn't easy work. Showing up at conventions, you know that wasn't easy work. Being seen and being heard. And this woman was born before you could probably vote. And getting out here and making sure it's done. I think that one of the things that I admire most about it is despite all those obstacles, she did not lose steam. She kept going. Despite, I always think about the toll that being a civil rights warrior, being a civil rights activist, being a woman who's actively involved in politics, the toll that it takes on you mentally and physically. This woman died at 59 years old, which is young by any means. She died of hypertension. The toll that it took on her body, her mind, she still did it. She did it for us. And I look at the sacrifice that those that came before us made. And she certainly, as we talk about women and the rise of politics, Kamala Harris, even Hillary Clinton has somebody like Fannie Lou Hamer to thank for laying the groundwork for us being able to speak and lift up others as we climb.
I'll begin from the first beginning, August the 31st in 1962, that I traveled 26 miles to the county courthouse to try to register to become a first-class citizen. I was met by my children when I returned from the courthouse, and my girl and my husband's cousin told me that this man that we had worked for was raising a lot of cane. And about that time, the man walked up, Mr. Marlowe, and he said, "Is Fannie Lou back yet?" So my husband said, "She is." I walked out of the house at this time. He said, "Fannie Lou said, you've been to the courthouse to try to register, and we are not ready for this in Mississippi." I said, "Well, I didn't register for you. I tried to register for myself." He said, "We are not going to have this in Mississippi, and you will have to go down and withdraw." And he said, "I'm looking for your answer, yay or nay." So I just looked. And he said, I'll give you to in the morning. And said, if you don't go down and withdraw, you will have to leave. And if you do go down and withdraw, it's only how I feel. You still might have to go. So I left that same night. 10 days later, on the 10th of September, 16 bullets was fired into the home of Mr. and Mrs. Robert Tucker, the people that I had gone to live with.
Do you think those 16 bullets stopped Fannie Lou Hamer? No, it didn't make her back
No.
down. And in fact, she continued and she worked hard with the people, for the people. She was vice chair in 1964. She ran for Congress as a candidate. Then, when that wasn't enough for her, she wanted to go to the Democratic convention to speak out. And Lyndon Johnson was president at the time. He did all he could to stop her from being able to speak at the Democratic National Convention. Even back then in the 60s, they had that televised. And so whoever spoke, their words went out over the network. So what he did to block Fannie Lou Hamer from speaking, he called a news conference. Well, Fannie Lou Hamer was so prolific in what she told about how she had been treated, beaten, people had been robbed, beaten, mistreated. The news picked that up. So you know what happened when you get picked up by the evening news. Even back in that day, her voice went out. Fannie Lou Hamer didn't let all that stop her at all. Her testimony was so moving. And so she continued to go on and just became a power for the people in her lifetime. I'm so proud of what she did for us.
I'm so glad that you amplified her work today because, so much of what we heard last week at the Democratic Convention was about reproductive freedom and speaking to women's ownerships of their bodies and not having that regulated, and the forced sterilization of Fannie Lou Hamer, the forced hysterectomy, and the inability to have children. We should certainly recognize that how much that affected us as Black women, and how now we have a candidate that's speaking up for all women. But it certainly affected us and our ability to have children, and that not being able to regulate our bodies or birth control or access to that. Fannie Lou Hamer is certainly a heroine that we need to amplify her message and the groundwork that she did. She spoke about these things long before they became hashtags and all of this. This woman dedicated her life to that. She couldn't have children because of that. So
Stress on her life, and she died in 1977, high blood pressure. Can you imagine the stress that it puts on one's life when you're in a position like that? Can you imagine the stress that's on Kamala Harris's life today? She looks so cool. She looks so calm and so collected, but you know that she is not. She's got it inside, but God has got her in control.
yes, and I think about our former First Lady Michelle Obama. One of the initiatives that she started as as First Lady was to eat better. She talked about she created a garden, and she talked about she really worked on children's health, improving children's health, and the whole Let's Move movement. And you think about how those two things and taking care of ourselves and factors that hopefully reside within our own control. When she talks about that and how those two factors can help contribute to our better mental health. I've read that Kamala Harris likes to walk and exercise and run. I hope that she has the space for those two things while she's under such tremendous pressure. I'm sure the world is a lot smaller for her in terms of how she can navigate it, but I certainly hope that she has access to some of those things that can support her mentally and physically as she, moves on to this higher plane.
Our guest today, Crystal Combs White. We appreciate you being here with us today as we continue our conversation about the issue. Fake elections, crisis, and voter fraud can undermine many of our citizens and keep them home from voting on election day. The opinion, what's your opinion about that? Do you think that could that keep you home from voting? So the opinion, while fraud by voters is rare,
Mhm.
it's fraud against the voters that does occur. We need to protect eligible voters against deception and election practices. So, how many citizens go back and vote twice? How many citizens go vote for dead people? How these are things even like with Donald Trump. How many citizens on election day in Georgia caused him not to get those 11,000 votes he called the Secretary of State telling him he needed, or that the election workers at the polls cheated? Didn't never happen.
No. And Michelle Obama alluded to shenanigans possibly on election day. And that's why I so believe in arming yourself. Maybe arming is not the word I need to use, but being an informed voter. And when I say that, I mean learning what the ballot looks like, learning when and where, and what your rights are as a voter. What your rights are as a voter. That is one of the ways that we can arm, we can guard against some of these things that might take place. Because I don't believe that voters intentionally, there's no evidence to support the fact that we're going out here to intentionally undo an election by voting twice, or an unregistered voter going. I think that mistakes are just that. There was a situation here in Michigan where a voter that forgot that there were some that forgot allegedly that they voted by absentee and they showed up to vote. I think that happens. I think that can someone get an absentee ballot and pass away? Yes, that can happen. That can happen. But I don't think there's any intention about it. But what there is intention is to defranchise your vote. There is intention of not counting your ballot. There is intention of you maybe not showing up with your driver's license and you need it and being turned back, and then the polling place is closed or moved or something like that. There is intention. There's intention. So arming yourself with enough information to, being an informed voter is one of the ways that we can stop some of this. So when I go vote, I heard that they might be turning people away if they have on shirts that say they support a candidate. Does that sound like a small thing? Well, if enough of us are armed and wound up about the election, I could put on one of my sorority shirts, and they say you can't come in here like that. So we have to make sure that we are doing our diligence as citizens and know what we need to do is showing up to the polls. If we show up, go vote. They can whittle away 10,000 votes, but it's harder to whittle away massive numbers. And we have not shown up like that. In our last primary here in the city of Detroit, only 21% of eligible voters voted. So it's easy. It's easy. The apathy is there because your vote's not going to be counted. Your vote is going to be counted. When we show up in mass, they won't have any choice but to.
And the things about some people do forget their driver's license run out. So when you go to the poll, they're going to be looking at your driver's license, comparing that with your signature on the signature pages in the books. So make sure that you have your driver's license updated. Make sure that your address is updated. Here in Ohio, our voter registration deadline to register by mail or in person or at the library, at your school, the deadline is October the 7th if you want to vote in that November 5th election. So you need to be about the business of taking care of that business. And so no more can you bring your light bill or your gas bill to the Board of Elections and say, see, this is where I live and this is me, I don't have a picture. You got to have all that ready and be ready when you go to the election polls to vote on November 5th.
This information causes confusion. It causes confusion and distraction. And you're right. We have to be informed enough to know what we need to bring to that polls. If you're married, does your name match your voter registration? I just received all of my voting information in the mail yesterday. So what did I do? I took it, I put it on the refrigerator next to the calendar. That's where I put it. Know where your stuff is, find it, put it away. It sounds so simple. And my mother used to say, I'm not fussing, but I am fussing. Like, get it together. I was telling my son that because, he has not lived in a world necessarily where he's seen all of the he hears all this rhetoric, on the internet, and he's like, I don't believe they're going to do that. But people will do that. You will show up, and you might be absent-minded enough to we can walk to our polling place. And so you could be, oh, I left my wallet, my name is, no, it's not going to work like that. They're going to be diligent.
Indeed, indeed. Well, if you live in the state of Ohio and you're a U.S. citizen, that means you were born here. As you talked about your husband from the Bahamas, and he is 4 out of 9 children that can vote in America.
3. He's the third. There's only 3 that can vote here, and he's one of them.
And that's because
he was born in the United States, and so he has dual citizenship. He can, he's a citizen of the Bahamas because both of his parents are.
And if he wanted to run for president, he would be eligible to run based upon the fact that he is a United States citizen with dual citizenship.
Correct. His birth certificate says, yes, his birth certificate says Detroit, Michigan. That's where he was born.
And like Barack Obama, like Kamala Harris, people tend to want to just throw these information out there like, well, no, she's not black. She's not eligible to run for the presidency. Or Trump would say, she didn't graduate from law school. Look who's talking. Somebody who paid someone to take the ACT. He paid somebody to take it for him.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but he's not even a lawyer. So I'm sure not going to talk about somebody that passed the bar and is a lawyer and went to school for it.
So you're eligible to vote if you're a U.S. citizen, you're 18 years or older, including, or you'll be 18 by election day. You've lived in the state for 30 days before the election, and you are currently not in jail or prison for a conviction or felony. Now, some felons can vote. They can get their records cleared. And that's one of the topics that we're going to talk about, hopefully next week, if my guests can confirm, about the issue of felons and how they can get their records cleared and be able to vote after they've done their time and served in prison. So those are a lot of votes out there that can come up and help a person to win, I guess. And also, you can register at the Secretary of State's office, the County Board of Elections, your high school, your vocational school, your public libraries. There are places all around, but people may not be advertising that for you, but you need to know. And if you don't know, ask somebody. And then if you know and you're not telling people about it, shame on you. Mm-hmm. And that's why this show is so important. People will run across it. They'll run across the replay and tell somebody about it. But that the information is there. And I want to make sure. I've been trying to register people to vote ever since I've been in radio, past 45 years. I mean, holding political forums, holding people and candidates responsible. I usually work in black radio, and if the white candidates wouldn't come to us, I would go to them. We need you to be on our political forum. Well, no, you need to do that because it's important. You need to tell people why you want their vote and make them be accountable as well. And so I've done that to register people and to make people accountable, even citizens, to make them accountable. You got to vote, and somebody's got to come to you to tell you why they want your vote.
Be informed. And you know what the other thing is that if in fact you go to vote and you feel like your right to vote is being denied for some frivolous reason or something is not quite right, you can contact your state or local election office, your local FBI office. You can contact your local U.S. Attorney's office, and you can contact your state elector's office, which in our state, Michigan, it would be our county clerk's office. And so if you think that some fraud is going on, there's something going on at your polls that is not right, call immediately. And I think that if you look for that information in the days leading up to the election, I know the website When We All Vote might have a number that'll put you in touch with your local number. Find that out. You're not alone on election day. And one of the things that you can do, there'll be people that are ready to help. There might also be people in your area that will give rides to the polls. I know some people are mobilizing to do that. And, if you need a ride, sometimes there might be a number that you can call and get a ride to vote. Or if you can give rides and there's people that you know that need a ride to the poll, offer to take them, do some stuff. I keep going back to having a plan. So our plan needs to be finding out where we vote, finding out if someone doesn't allow us to vote, what can we do that day? Don't just walk away and don't vote. Find out if you've got all your ducks in a row. I'm at the right place. I got my ID and they're still not letting me vote. Call those numbers. I just look on that website When We All Vote. Call, find out what you can do. Do not just let someone turn you away that day.
Indeed. In fact, big churches, larger churches that have access to vans and automobiles, they mobilize. And I know there's Souls to the Polls, SOULS to the polls,
Yes.
POLES. A lot of organizations are working on that effort to get people out to vote as well. Well, Project 2025 is going to play a big stake in who people vote for and why they vote. And we have guests that are scheduled for later on in the season to talk about Project 25. But one in particular on this whole issue about Project 25, created by the Heritage Foundation, part of Donald Trump's wish list, 900-page project that affects us in every area. And in the voting process, it definitely plays a big role. This is to the wish list, things that he wants to happen. I mean, criminalizing the voting process, it will shift responsibility for prosecuting election-related offenses from the Department of Justice, their Civil Rights Division, to the Criminal Division, and saying that otherwise voter registration fraud and unlawful ballot corrections will remain federal election offenses that are never appropriately investigated. They will allow government access to state voter rolls. So people know that's private information. And so the government shouldn't have access to our public information. Well, Project 25 will allow them to have that. So many parts of this Project 25, Trump's format for how he wants to run the government, besides taking away people's jobs, besides just making the government central focus on how people are going to work, they could lose their jobs. I mean, many things will be happening. So I think that's one thing that we have to look at really deep. If you want to vote for Donald Trump and you think Project 25 is not going to affect you, and you somebody that's of color, better watch out.
That every child having to have military training in high school, the registration for creating a person that will be responsible for collecting data around miscarriages and abortions for each state. I had to look up what free banking meant. That means he wants to abolish the Federal Reserve Bank, which is the protection to make sure that money you put in the bank is still there. He wants to create a free banking system, getting rid of overtime, getting a paid overtime, which means that you don't have the protection of saying your union says that you have to be paid. And he says it's not as bad as that, but what's worse than working and not being paid? That sounds a little bit like enslavement to me. So as the profit margins have gone up for these large companies, of course, people that work hard are not going to be working smarter, because he's just going to be working them. He's just going to be working them. And so that makes the affordability of housing, groceries, all these other things that are out of control. I don't think there's not one aspect of our lives that Project 2025 does not speak to. And a lot of people are saying, well, he said he's distanced himself. I don't know how 80 or 90% of the people that formerly work for you are involved in something and you don't know about it. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Our guest today, Crystal Combs White from Michigan, north of Detroit, Michigan, but still the flavor is there. You
Hmm.
grew up in Warrensville, Ohio, I understand?
Yep. Yep. In the
Okay.
Cleveland area, southeast suburbs of Cleveland, right off 195th Street. So, went to church in Cleveland, just in the suburbs. And one of the reasons why we moved to Warrensville was because of desegregation in Cleveland. And my father, I was starting school. He told me then, I must have been 6 years old. I don't know how I got this in my mind. He said he'd never put me on a bus at 6 o'clock in the morning to go to a school 20 miles away from our house. So we moved. We moved to the suburbs.
How did that affect you?
Well, I ended up being one of two African Americans in my first grade class. And how it affected me was the very first day that I went to school, my first grade teacher administered a reading test to me to see if I was capable of being in the first grade. Now, my father had been a school teacher, and my mom taught me to read before I started school. So then she couldn't believe that I passed it, and she gave it to me again. Now, if you give somebody a test again right after they've taken it, I improved the second time. So she just let me stay. She just let me stay in the class. But it was hard when I first started school. It was hard. It was hard. So, but I will say that it eventually got better. And I'm grateful to the experience my parents gave me growing up in that suburb.
Crystal Combs White. It's amazing to hear the stories that and experiences that we all share as youth growing up in America. And as varied as your story is, mine would be the same. But the people that shared their stories, even talking about the Democratic National Convention and how Kamala Harris showed and told her story about growing up with her mom. She grew up with a powerful mom who was a scientist, and her mom, she lived in raised in California, but they moved to a part of Canada when she was a young girl, but then came back, later on, and then she went to college here in the United States. But things that her mom taught her would never leave her brain. And that's why a lot of people said, well, when she was vice president under Joe Biden, she didn't do very much. What could she do? I know she did some things, but
Hmm.
they wanted her to build walls and do all the things that they think that could have happened if Trump had not voted or told his cronies not to vote for the wall, building the wall and taking care of that issue. But they wanted her to perform miracles, and she wasn't there to do that. She was there to learn, and she did. So when it came time for her to step into service, what did she do? In less than a month, what did she do? It was in her all along. She had that. She didn't just discover that she could speak and express herself. It was
No,
there all along.
no, amazing, isn't it? Isn't it? And
Yes.
as my grandmother would say, there's a lot under that hat, isn't it? She
Yes.
took that hat off, and there's a lot under that hat, and we're hearing her fully. She didn't, as she says, she didn't just fall out of the coconut tree. That's been there. This is a very accomplished woman, okay?
Yes.
And she got up, and the power behind that speech, the power, all of those thoughts she had. I, I think I am in awe of the way that she has hit the ground running since she has announced her candidacy. And I'm glad that she hasn't just sat down with people that want to tear her apart on some of these news media outlets that I feel have been compromised in some way. I hope she finds someone with integrity to talk to, when she does finally do a sit down. But I think she's given us a lot of substance in her speeches about what her vision is. I think she has, and I think she has not let the rhetoric influence her voice. And I think we saw that on display at the Democratic convention when she spoke. She didn't let that influence her. It didn't shake her, and I loved it. I loved it.
Indeed, there's more to come and more that we can learn from Kamala Harris about what her plans are. It just not going to come out of a hat overnight. 30 days, what could she do? She'll have it. She'll be working on it, and she has people that will be working for her. And I expect that was going to happen. But the jealousy that you can see in Donald Trump, worried about crowd sizes, Oh, he says my crowd that I had when I was took the oath of office was bigger than Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech crowd. Okay, not true. But he
No.
just in his mind somehow he visualizes these things that are not true. He's just a narcissistic liar. I mean,
It's scary. And I compare Project 2025 to some kind of manifesto. I mean, it's not driven by need, it's driven by want. And that is the difference to me between the two parties right now. Driven by what they think the Republicans might think that we need that. But there is the end game of this control thing that they want is totally fueled by hate. It's totally fueled by hate. And that's when Raphael Warnock said this is a vote of consequence, a vote of morals. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about. I think he summed it up accurately. So I guess, all of them were my favorite that spoke at the Democratic National Convention because I felt like they were speaking to me.
but even the entertainers that educated, they performed, but they educated. Each one of them had a special message to us based upon what Kamala felt and what she wanted. Even
Yes.
even you starting out with Beyonce's "Song of Freedom." Amazing that she chose that, and Beyonce accepted. Yes, you can use my song. Then there's Stevie Wonder, "Higher Ground," from back in the day.
Yes.
Patti
Yes.
LaBelle, "You Are My Friend." I mean, all of them had amazing messages in their songs. And so whoever made the selection, whoever selected the DJ and what the DJ did with his his music background for each state, I thought that was fantastic. And people
You
up on the
know,
floor dancing.
They were. And, I was telling my husband, I said, we always want to refer to America as this melting pot. And I said, what she said is, we're this beautiful quilt of all these different colors and flavors. And music is, it identifies us. It identifies, I felt like each one of those songs that was picked identified the state. I mean, people here, I live in the same area that Eminem lives, and people just love Eminem here. So that Lose Yourself. It's so each song kind of identified that state and that culture of that state and who those people were.
Yes.
And it was inclusive, but it let people say who they are. And I think that's what that convention was. But, my message to people about voting is show them who you are, show up and vote. Show up.
And that is the most important thing that we wanted to bring to this show today, is that our vote
Mhm.
does count. Our vote will count. And hopefully Donald Trump won't try to steal any more votes than what he needs. Now, if people come up and vote and they say it's going to be close, I'm not so sure what the vote's going to be. But I know that a lot is left up to Electoral College and these swing states, and how important it is for them to get there and to win the vote, and to get the confidence of the people there, and so that those that go to Electoral College will do the right thing. It's going to be important.
And so if the large cities where voter turnout has been low and people have been skeptical of having your vote count, that's why I want to encourage people to just make a plan and vote. And if you're a voter and you know a non-voter, just kind of like President Obama said, just kind of work on them, talk to them, just kind of help nudge them along quickly so you don't miss those deadlines. But just work on them. And if we each take a friend, let's vote. I'm having a watch party that night. So I'm gonna a watch event, and I hope it ends up being a party. So that's what I will say. Let's make it a day. Let's make it a day.
Indeed. So as you leave, we leave the show today, and we want to make everyone aware that you can make a commitment yourself. Like Crystal's husband said, he's going to talk to people about voting. We're going to be talking to people about voting. So you, as a viewer and listener of the show today, and through the weeks in time, be sure to tell somebody about voting. Make sure they go to the polls. Get your children elected. register to vote so that they can elect who they want to at the polls. Nobody said that you had to vote for Kamala Harris, but if you do, that's a good thing too. That's a good thing too. Thank you, Crystal.
Thank you so much for
White.
having me talk with you. I've enjoyed it. And thank you for letting my voice be heard.
Indeed. And thank you for putting out that word of vote, the big black and white sign. Go to her Facebook page. Crystal White, come see what I'm talking about, that big black and white sign. Well, a man once said, truly great friends are hard to find and difficult to leave and impossible to forget. So I never forget you, Crystal, and all those that come before me as well. If you think that you have a message you want to have on the show, write me. Send me an email, ednaparish7@gmail.com. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you around the next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Straight Talk Live with renowned radio pioneer Edna Howell Parrish, the program dedicated to presenting thought-provoking issues and opinions with the goal of challenging listeners to re-examine their assumptions and expand their opinions and give thought to new ideas and concepts to better their lives and the lives of others. Join us next week for another opportunity to participate in making the world better. So until next week, live your best life from your friends at Straight Talk Live and host Edna Howell Parrish.